The soldiers dragged Jesus away. On their way out of the city, they saw a man called Simon coming in from the fields, and they grabbed him and they made him carry Jesus' cross along the road. Lots of people were still following Jesus, even now. Many of the women were crying, and Jesus turned around to face them. "Don't cry because of me. You should cry for yourselves and for your children. There are terrible things coming, much worse than you can imagine. In those days you'll wish that you weren't here. If these things are happening to me now when I'm here with you, imagine what will happen when I'm not." There were 2 more men being crucified that day, and when they reached the place outside the city called the Skull, the soldiers fastened the men onto their crosses and lined them up side by side with Jesus in the middle. As Jesus hung there on the cross, he said, "Father God, please, please, please forgive these people. They don't know what they're doing."
The soldiers were standing around waiting for the end, and they were arguing about who should get to keep Jesus' clothes. They were rolling dice to see who would be the winner. The leaders, who had wanted Jesus dead, were standing around and were still shouting things at Jesus. "Look at him! He said he saved people. He can't even save himself, can he? If he's God's Messiah, that shouldn't be too hard." The soldiers shouted things at Jesus too. They even brought him some wine. "If you're the King of the Jews," they said, "come on down and save yourself." There was a sign above Jesus' head that said, "This is the King of the Jews." Even one of the other men being crucified shouted at Jesus, "You're supposed to be the Messiah, aren't you? Do some saving then. Save yourself. Save me." "Hey," shouted the other man, "aren't you afraid of God? You're on the cross because of all the awful things you did. We deserve to be here. It's our own fault. But this man, this Jesus, he never did anything wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus said, "I tell you the truth. I promise that even today you will be with me in paradise." At around 12 o'clock, everything went dark. The sky was black. The sun had stopped shining. Everything stayed dark until the middle of the afternoon, when suddenly the curtain in the temple tore in two, and Jesus shouted out, "Father, into your hands I place my spirit." And then he died.
When the Roman soldier in charge saw what had just happened, he called out to God, "This man was innocent." The crowds began to leave. As they went away, they were so sad. Jesus' closest friends and some of the women who had followed him all the way from Galilee stood in the distance and watched everything that happened. Only the priests were allowed behind the curtain in the temple, where they believed God lived. When Jesus died and the curtain was torn in two, it meant that all the barriers between ordinary folk and God had been taken away. Wow! A man called Joseph, from a place called Arimathea, was a member of Pilate's council. He was a good guy, and he had never been okay with what had happened to Jesus. So he went to see Pilate and asked if he could take down Jesus' body from the cross. It was the least he could do. Joseph took Jesus' body and wrapped it in beautiful cloth He then carefully carried it to a brand new tomb that had been carved out of the rocks and laid Jesus down inside. Some of the women were still following behind, and after they'd seen where Joseph had put Jesus' body, they went away to get some spices ready. Spices helped to stop things from smelling bad when someone had died. But the spices these women were getting ready for Jesus were expensive and precious. They showed just how special Jesus was. It was now Friday evening, and that meant that the Jewish Sabbath was about to begin. The women couldn't go back to where Jesus was. They had to rest.